Hey, what's up? I'd like to call up two readings of that Hinnebusch and Dahl. Reading these two guys, Hinnebusch, whatever his name is, and Dahl, I came with a conclusion or noticed that these two guys largely agree on at least two dimensions of democracy, that is, competitiveness and inclusiveness. Now, Hindenburg, however, seemed to me to have failed in defining or pinpointing or finding a midpoint, if you like, between these two concepts, which Dahl succeeded in doing by defining the concept of many rulers in a government as polyarchy and by skillfully defining or redefining the concepts of autocracy and autocracy and inclusiveness as closed hegemony and inclusive hegemony. So Hindenburg, to me, especially in his usage of the term inclusiveness, is being very broad, or he uses this term very broadly, while Dahl succeeded in sort of breaking down this inclusiveness into and calls it inclusive hegemony. And I'd like to call it or break it down even further and define the two constituents of this inclusive hegemony into that of what I call positive totalitarianism and negative totalitarianism, just for the sake of argument. Now, what I mean by positive totalitarianism, or an example of it, is the National Progressive Front in Syria and Iraq, which says a lot, actually. On the surface, the genius or it is ingenious, this system is ingenious because it is unclear, given that on the surface you would think it is a democracy because it entails inclusiveness. But what it is what I'd like to call an under-democracy from underemployment because it is unclear. So this national progressive front, what it is actually is an aggregation of opposition parties gathered in a bundle which is easily manipulated and controlled by the iron fist of the Ba'ath Party. That's what it is. So this is one form of positive totalitarianism, which is one form of inclusive hegemony. This positive totalitarianism, of course, comes in contrast with negative totalitarianism, where zero public contestation is seen in the air, just like North Korea. So positive and negative totalitarianism, this is the way I break Dahl's concept of inclusive hegemony. But either way, actually, inclusiveness, not only in the Arab world, in my opinion, is or cannot, or at least could not, purify democracy, since it is utopian in its characteristic, and this is my point of view. Anyway, when it comes to Dahl, back to Dahl, I would like to encroach a bit and add my own touch and fill this large space in his diagram that he speaks of, not by classifying democracies, but rather by sort of try to show in a rather simplistic way what kind of obstacles are there in the trajectory of the Arab democracies towards polyarchy. Foreign meddling and religion, that is, simply put. Yes, it is, in my opinion, one rock with two labels on it. That is what is standing in the way of transition process, in the way of the transition process, if you like, from a closed hegemony into that of a polyarchy. Now, when it comes to foreign meddling, we can all think of one example or two of that. So, for the sake of not ruining your night, I won't bring it up. But in defense of the other labeling argument, that is religion, I would like to hint first that the key characteristic of democracy lifted by Dahl, that a democracy is a continuous responsiveness of the government to the preferences of its citizens. This concept, or key characteristic as he calls it, was lifted actually circa 800 years ago by an Islamic historiographer, namely Ibn Khaldun. You probably heard of him. Yet history teaches us actually that Islam does not accept pluralism and multiplicity of parties, if you like, within a given body of government. From the Safavid to the Umayyad to the Mamluks to even modern day Saudi Arabia and Iran. In fact, I think the reason why these two latter autocracies have or still exist is because of their exploitation of the concept of democracy, and a proof to that is that they still call themselves a kingdom and a republic. And for those who usually bring up examples from the Far East, like Singapore and Malaysia, being democracies, albeit being pure Islamic or purely Islamic, well, I'd like to invite you to look at the political and cultural structures of these countries first. But just a hint, a quick hint: the ruling party in these countries is not Islamic. They're either dubbed national or a people's party, given the vast ethnicities of these countries. Now, in fact, back in 2015, another quick hint, Malaysia witnessed a very great chaos because the Islamic Party in the opposition tried to lobby or press the government into applying a stricter Islamic Sharia law, where all sorts of medieval torturing methods you can think of would be revived, like that of impalement, dismembering, or decapitation of heads. On occasions that the liberal West would think of as misdemeanors or petty crime. Now, having said that, you probably noticed that, just like Dahl, I don't believe in pure democracies, especially as a political system, which I think we should be careful calling it or labeling democracy by it. We should not call a democracy a political system. What it is, in its original meaning, is a concept of coexistence, a survival mechanism, if you like, not for ourselves. And this is where the sublimity of democracy comes. It is for the other. And this, I believe, we can and ought to learn at early childhood, just like they do here in Sweden, when they go about and teach their children concepts of tolerance of the other, regardless of their religious affiliation or ethnic background or sexual orientation, and many other human values, really, until they reach the pivotal part where of liberal democracy, where all peaceful arguments and contestations get resolved via voting. And even when it comes to voting, they actually teach them how to vote by virtue of mock elections, which is good. It is really good as long as voting or freedom of choice comes last. That is, it is not seen as the core principle of democracy, as many mistakenly sandwich democracy in two pieces of pale bread, of that of voting and its inclusive meaning of freedom of choice. Democracy is not voting. So because if that's true, actually, if that's true, and this comes to my mind, if that's true, then the destiny of the bigger exporter of democracy is decided by 538 electors, out of which at least 270 votes are needed in order to elect a president. And if this is again true, then how is that not a mere linear way of applying the tyranny of the majority by virtue of an even more systematically constrained mob passion that can be even more prone to manipulation? See what I mean? Like, and suppose it's not. Suppose it's not. Is not that basically what Socrates or Plato or wherever that is spoke of? That is the elite voting system or principle, which in turn, like we I think agree on, contradicts the core principle or concept of democracy, the rule of the people. Leave that to you. Good night.